So today I'm going to continue with my 1957-58 Topps player profiles, and don't worry if you missed the first part, that's okay. You don't have to hear them in order to enjoy them. Today I'm going to be featuring cards 9 through 16, and I hope you enjoy. Next up is Jack Nicklaus, whose pro career included multiple stops over the course of 9 seasons. Eventually, he settled in with the Celtics in 1953. While in Boston, Nicklaus balanced his time on the court with his dental studies. The back of his 57 Topps card even mentions flying back and forth from school to games. But don't think he wasn't ready to play once he arrived. One off-season article noted that Nicklaus had, quote, no stomach to speak of, thanks to regular visits to the YMCA. Ultimately, Nicklaus' hard work, both on and off the court, paid off. In 1957, he added 8 points and 6 rebounds off the bench on the way to a Celtics championship. And then in 1958, he earned his Doctor of Dentistry and retired from basketball shortly after. Nearly a decade later, Nicklaus reunited these interests when he became the team dentist for the newly formed Seattle Supersonics. While the 57 Topps card is considered Nicklaus' official rookie, he was also featured in the rare Royal Dessert set that came out 5 years prior. However, this wasn't a pack-issued release, and obtaining one involved consuming the pudding or custard inside. I think it's safe to assume that Dr. Nicklaus probably preferred the sugar-free 57 Topps version instead. The next player in the set is described on the back of his card as the finest jump shooter in the game. And while Paul Arizin didn't invent the jump shot, he was one of its earliest and most effective adopters. As a result, Arizin was a 10-time All-Star, a 2-time scoring champ, and he earned All-NBA honors 4 different times. He also led the Philadelphia Warriors to a championship in 1956. And this was all despite missing 2 prime seasons during the Korean War. It's likely Arizin could have upped those numbers at the end of his career as well. However, when the Warriors announced they were heading out west, the Philadelphia forward proclaimed, "I definitely will not play in San Francisco." Arizin decided it was time to take his part-time gig at IBM and turn it into a career instead. But it wasn't long before the NBA great made his way back to the hardwood, this time with the Camden Bullets of the EPBL. The league's weekends-only schedule was perfect for Arizin, who was now working a normal 9 to 5. In just 3 seasons with the Bullets, he won an MVP award and led the team to a title in 1964. Not too shabby for a full-time salesman. With that being said, if you want something that's representative of Arizin's time with Philadelphia, his 57 Topps rookie is a great place to start. And unlike his 61 Fleer cards, the picture is in color. It's just a shame we don't get to see that famous jump shot in action. Card number 11 features Chuck Noble, a feisty guard who played all 7 of his NBA seasons with the Pistons. And while his scoring averages weren't particularly high, Noble's one-handed push shot could hit from long range when needed. If you're looking to read more about Noble online, unfortunately there's not a lot of information out there. However, when I searched his name in old newspaper archives, the same 2 themes surfaced again and again: injuries and altercations. And in some cases, one was the result of the other. For example, there was a story about a college game where a pair of Seton Hall players provoked Noble and one of his teammates until the 4 of them eventually came to blows. That's not even the best part. In an attempt to break things up, the band decided to play the national anthem, and oddly enough, it worked. Several years later, in Game 4 of the finals, Noble supposedly traded punches with Hawks guard Bob Harrison. As things often went back then, neither player was assessed any sort of foul. 3 years after that, there was an incident that cut Noble's face bad enough that he had to be taken to the hospital to get stitched up. And that's not even counting the time he collided with the metal basket supports and broke 3 ribs as a result. So it should be no surprise that Noble is pictured on his 57 Topps rookie with 2 of his fingers taped together. It's hard telling what exactly caused that. Perhaps it was just another day in the rough-and-tumble world of 1950s basketball. Next up is Hall of Famer Slater Martin, one of the best defensive guards in the NBA's formative years. In 11 seasons, Martin earned 7 All-Star selections and was selected to the All-NBA team 5 times. While Mikan was undoubtedly the biggest star of the Lakers' first dynasty, it was Martin who commanded John Kundla's offense on the floor. The team claimed 4 titles during his tenure in Minneapolis. Nevertheless, with contract disputes nearly every season, it became clear the 2 parties weren't seeing eye to eye. Eventually, Martin landed in St. Louis, where he helped Bob Pettit's Hawks capture the organization's only championship in 1958. No matter what team he played for, Martin proved to be an ever-present thorn in Bob Cousy's side. This rivalry is even mentioned on the back of Martin's 57 Topps card. Cousy has said on several occasions that Martin was the toughest defender he ever faced, so much so that the Celtics guard spent part of one summer working on his jumper, a shot he later described as the worst thing that has happened to basketball in 10 years. As things go, Martin is sometimes lost in the shuffle of Lakers lore, but in the grand scheme of things, he most certainly earned the respect of his peers on the court. Okay, the number 13 card depicts the highest scorer of the 50s and one of the NBA's 75 greatest players of all time. Dolph Schayes was a 12-time All-Star, a 12-time All-NBA selection, and he helped the Nats capture the organization's first title in 1955. Believe it or not, Schayes attributed a lot of this success to an injury he sustained halfway through his third season, a fractured wrist that later turned out to be a blessing in disguise. When the 6'8" forward was forced to spend nearly 6 weeks with his right arm in a cast, he worked diligently to fine-tune his outside shot and develop his offhand at the same time. Once healthy, Schayes was able to merge these elements alongside an already dominant right side drive. Coincidentally, Schayes broke the same wrist again just 2 years later when he was hit by Celtics big man Bob Harris on a drive to the basket. True to form, Schayes was back in action shortly after, this time brandishing a cast for the entirety of the 54 finals. Thankfully, you won't see any sort of cast on Schayes' 57 Topps rookie. You will, however, see a shot of him making a hard drive to the basket and pulling up with his left, and to me that just feels right. I think it captures his evolution as a player perfectly, so kudos to Topps for that. The next player in the set is Dick Atha, an aggressive backcourt man with an accurate one-hand push shot. Atha was selected by the Knicks in the 1953 NBA draft, but was called away by the Army shortly after. 2 years later, he finally debuted with the New York squad, where he appeared in 25 games total. The next season, Atha was placed on the reserve list, presumably for another stint in the service. This might explain why the back of his 57 Topps rookie refers to him as a part-time toiler. In 1957, Atha was traded to the Pistons, where he played his final 18 games. Following his time in Detroit, Atha moved back home where he served as a teacher, a principal, and an athletic director, among other roles. Next up is a player who was a key part of the Celtics dynasty of the 50s and 60s. Frank Ramsey, often referred to as the original sixth man, redefined the role of a bench player by providing Red Auerbach's squad with an instant offensive spark, although at times this involved some creative maneuvering on his part. In a 1963 article for Sports Illustrated, Ramsey divulged the psychology and the science behind an effective flop. The Celtics guard explained, "Drawing fouls chiefly requires the ability to provide good, heartwarming drama and to direct it to the right audience. I never forget where the referees are when I go into an act." As you might expect, this piece was despised by Ramsey's peers and NBA refs alike. He later claimed, "For a couple months after that, the officials let people beat the hell out of me." Nevertheless, Ramsey's work on the court cemented his status as an enduring figure in Celtics lore, which in turn made his 57 Topps rookie a hot commodity as well, despite the fact that it just pictures him dribbling a ball in front of a brick wall. Interestingly enough, his 61 Fleer card uses the exact same shot. They just zoomed in a little bit and cropped out the background. And here you thought it was just Panini that uses recycled images on cards. Card number 16 features Dick McGuire, a 7-time All-Star and a 1-time All-NBA selection. While never known as much of a scorer, McGuire served as the perfect setup man for a string of Knicks finals runs in the early 1950s. In fact, the pass first guard still ranks third on the organization's all-time assist list, trailing only Walt Frazier and Mark Jackson. Unfortunately, his Knicks could never assemble a competitive front court in an era that was dominated by post play. When 1956 rolled around, New York bolstered its guard rotation with younger players and slashed McGuire's minutes as a result. The next offseason, the veteran playmaker was traded to the Pistons, just in time for the team's move to Detroit, and just in time for Topps' inaugural NBA release as well. So while it might seem odd to see Dick the Knick sporting a Pistons jersey, just remember that this card represents a brief period where McGuire returned to All-Star form and got his first break as an NBA coach in the process. This experience proved to be invaluable as McGuire later returned to New York and served his hometown Knicks in various roles.